how much porn is too much, and if I watch 30 minutes a day, is that an addiction, or at what point does it classify as an addiction? First, we have to look at what this word addiction is and how do we define addiction. And there's many definitions out there. There's no right or wrong answer, but the one that I like is any behavior that you repeatedly do despite the negative consequences it's bringing into your life. So if there's some behavior that you're engaged in, whether it's using a substance or acting out with a behavior, and you repeatedly keep doing that behavior, even though you know it's causing harm in your life, it's bringing negative consequences, you could classify that as an addiction. So hey guys, welcome back to the show. A few months ago, I sat down with Melissa Hadley Barrett on her show, the Penis Project podcast. And she was kind enough to let us re-share that combo here on Unhooked. Melissa runs a sexual health clinic in Australia, and the conversation we had ended up being one of the most honest, wide-ranging, and comprehensive combos I've had on the topic of porn addiction. In the conversation, we talk about how porn rewires the brain, how it quietly kills intimacy before you even notice it's happening. We also get into urge surfing, the 90-second rule, and why willpower alone almost never works. And the one thing that I keep coming back to, no matter who I'm talking to, that you can't do this alone. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation from the Penis Project podcast.
Welcome back to the Penis Project podcast. Today, we're going to dive into an important overlooked topic, which is how compulsive behaviours like porn addiction impact a man's sexual health and intimacy. Our guest today is Jeremy, and I'm going to say his surname wrong so he can correct me, Lipakowitz. He's a former Buddhist monk, meditation teacher, and certified executive coach. He now helps men break free from compulsive behaviours, create discipline, and build fulfilling relationships. He's also the founder of Unhooked Academy and the host of the Unhooked podcast, which we will find all about today. So, Jeremy, you've had a really interesting journey. You've gone from doing genetics research at Duke University to living as a monk, and now you're doing the complete opposite. You're right out there coaching men all over the world. So can you give me a short version of your journey?
Yeah, well, I guess you kind of nailed it right there. The short version is my background is in the sciences. So most of my life I was studying genetics and genomics and working my way up to be a research professor. But somewhere along the journey, when I was a young boy, I started getting engaged in pornography myself. It started as just a curiosity of sexuality and nudity and things that made me feel good when I looked at them. And so I started using porn myself at a very early age, maybe 10 or 11 years old. And it slowly progressed, the way it usually does with addiction. You don't notice it getting worse over time. It just slowly gets more and more ingrained in your life. And so it got to the point where by the time I was in college, I was watching maybe an hour or two every night. I'd go into my room, lock the door, and just binge on porn. And I slowly in college started to realize how it was impacting my life, how it was impacting my sense of self-worth, my happiness, my ability to be satisfied in my relationships, my ability to take pleasure in the little joys in life. And then also just how it was, kind of slowly morphing my expectations of intimacy and my partner's bodies and all kinds of things like that. So I started to realize it was a problem. And to make a long story short, I found a way out of it through mindfulness and self-compassion and a lot of meditation work and personal development. And through that journey, realized that it was something I was very passionate about. So I've started, helping people find their way out of it as well in a very secular, kind of non-religious approach to it.
And so is it just porn addiction that you help men with, or other things as well?
Yeah, it's really everything.
Yeah.
One of the things that we explore in the work that I do and in the community that I run is that it's all a spectrum, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the particular substance or behavior. At the core, addiction is really the same at the root level. It's some kind of coping mechanism for dealing with emotions that you don't know how to process or deal with. So whether it's porn or sexting addiction or dating app addiction or social media or junk food, we have guys in our community who have all of it and different mixes of those things. Yeah, it's kind of a variety of things that we explore. But most people tend to come to me or to my community for porn addiction or sex addiction specifically. But then we start to uncover that, yeah, it's also about all the different ways that we try to escape our reality.
So when you went to live as a monk, was that because that was like one of the things that you thought would enable you to stop your own addiction?
Yeah, great question. I kind of skimmed over that part of my journey. To rewind a little bit, there was a moment in my life in college where I had kind of a rock bottom or existential crisis where I realized, hey, this porn thing is really causing a lot of damage in my life. And it was in that moment that I also realized it wasn't just porn. It was, I was never going to be happy if I kept living the way I was living. That in a fundamental way, I was focused on the wrong things. I was focused on always getting more than I had, always wanting more. And I needed to do something about that. So that existential crisis sent me down a little bit of a journey of looking into things like positive psychology, and I started learning about neuroplasticity and the science of the mind. And that introduced me to Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist meditation, which totally changed my life. I started to realize that a lot of the problems I was experiencing were problems with how my mind had been wired over years of engaging in porn or engaging in any kind of addictive, compulsive behavior. And so I realized that Buddhist meditation, particularly mindfulness and vipassana and these kinds of things, could be a tool that I could use to change my life and rewire my mind. And part of that was going on what are called silent retreats. So I started going on a lot of these silent meditation retreats for 10 days. You go off and you don't read or write or speak to other people. You're just meditating. So those are
Those.
Vipassana retreats. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I've
hmm
looked at those. They have them in the southwest from where I live. And for years, I've always been fascinated by them. But then anyone who knows me will know the idea of being silent for 10 days in a row is really frightening. So, yeah.
Well, I highly encourage you to garner up the courage and give it a shot, because it's really fascinating. So many people tell me that the idea of not talking is the scariest part, and that actually is one of the easiest parts, it turns out, and it actually becomes something that you look forward to. It's like, oh, I don't have to talk to anyone. I don't have to worry about what to say or who do I sit next to, and I can just kind of let go of all the stories and all the need to impress anyone or be anything. I can just focus on myself for 10 days. The hard part is not having anything to distract you.
I'm not worried about the silence. I was worried about the no distraction and just being inside your head for that long. I would think, wow, how do you not go crazy? But yeah.
That's the hard part. You do go a little crazy, but it's a really valuable experience because you start to learn about how your mind is working, and you start to see the way that it is actually behaving on a day-to-day basis without you realizing it. Um, so those retreats became a really important part of my recovery and my journey, and so I started going on maybe one retreat a year, a little bit more than once a year. Me spending time as a monk, ordaining as a monk, was really just the culmination of doing that for 10 years. I had decided to go on a month-long silent retreat in Burma. And on that retreat, I had the opportunity to ordain as a monk while I was on retreat. And so I took the opportunity. But it wasn't me becoming a monk wasn't at the beginning of my journey. It was kind of in the middle or end of my journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then what made you decide to leave that lifestyle and then go and, immerse yourself in helping other men overcome their compulsive behaviors?
Yeah, so when I got to graduate school, I had already been doing some of these meditation retreats and really getting into meditation. And I started teaching meditation just for fun, kind of as a way to keep myself accountable.
Mhm.
And I slowly realized that a couple things. One, I realized I was good at teaching meditation in a secular way. A lot of people were coming to me and saying, hey, I really appreciate you explaining this meditation stuff in a non woo woo way, in a way that's just kind of grounded in science. So I was good at it. And also, I just felt really meaningful. to me to teach meditation. So eventually I left my PhD program and just started teaching meditation full time. And I did that for a few years. And over time, I started working with more people one on one and started realizing that a lot of people, especially the men that were coming to my meditation classes, were struggling with porn addiction. And I realized, hey, this is something that I know very well, it's something I experienced. It's what got me into meditation. And I could help some of these guys. And so I slowly just started shifting towards doing more work around porn addiction recovery and talking about how it is a thing and you're not alone and all these kinds of things. And the more that I did that, the more that I realized, hey, this is actually a massive issue in society. It's something that we don't talk about enough. A lot of guys experience it and are working through it. And it's something I could really make a difference in the world by addressing.
Mm. I think you're right. We get asked this all the time in my clinic about, and so that's something that I'm always being asked is, how do you identify, like if you're a man and you were listening to this interview, what
Yeah.
do you mean by porn addiction? Like, what are the signs that you're addicted as opposed to just you've got a healthy interest and you're watching it every now and then?
It's such a great question. It is the one that's on almost every guy's mind is, okay, how much porn is too much? And if
Mm.
I watch 30 minutes a day, is that an addiction? Or, at what point does it classify as an addiction? The, first we have to look at what this word addiction is and how do we define addiction. And there's many definitions out there. There's no right or wrong answer, but the one that I like is any behavior that you repeatedly do despite the negative consequences it's bringing into your life. So if there's some behavior that you're engaged in, whether it's using a substance or acting out with a behavior, and you repeatedly keep doing that behavior, even though you know it's causing harm in your life, that it's bringing negative consequences, you could classify that as an addiction. And we really have to look holistically here. Like, on the whole, is it bringing more harm than the good it's causing? Because there are some behaviors that cause a little bit of harm, but on the whole, they're actually causing more good in your life. And so, really looking at it from that holistic point of view is important. So, given that definition of addiction, then the onus is on each individual person to look at their life and say, in what ways is this causing harm? And in what ways is this bringing benefit? So, what are the benefits that porn brings? Distraction, pleasure. It's kind of a short list. It's a powerful list.
Mhm.
Distraction and pleasure are a short list of benefits, but they are benefits, and we have to be honest about that. Um, what are the harms that it causes? So many. I mean, all the ways that it slowly erodes, your desire for intimacy with your partner because you're spending that sexual energy on in front of a screen rather than spending that sexual energy on your partner. The ways that it's impacting your expectations of intimacy, your expectations of what your partner's body should look like.
Mm.
One of the things that porn addiction does to you is it also gets you addicted to novelty. You start to associate your pleasure with, oh, seeing something new. That's what brings me pleasure. That's what arouses me, is something new, something novel, something taboo, rather than training your brain to find arousal or to be aroused by deepening intimacy with your partner. So there's all these different ways that it really impacts intimacy. But then it's also, on top of that, it's impacting focus, your ability to concentrate and do deep work, your ability to deal with difficult emotions and not run away from them.
Mhm.
There's so many ways that it can cause harm. One of the problems, I just want to point out, that a lot of people, especially men, are unaware of the problems it's causing because many of the problems are very subtle. They're things that build up slowly over long periods of time. They're not the obvious, you wake up with a hangover or you're doing fentanyl and,
Yeah.
overdosing. Um, so there's a lot of subtle consequences that it takes some awareness to actually see.
Yeah. And what about, is there ever an amount of porn, in your opinion, that is okay?
It's a great question. My perspective, so I don't come at this from a religious kind of like porn is a sin.
Mhm.
I don't have anything wrong in principle with porn.
Mhm.
The problem is that from the cases that I've seen and the work that I've done, I would argue, maybe there's less than 1% of the male population that can have a healthy relationship with porn. That when you just look at what are the pros versus the cons, almost always 99.9% of the time, there's more harm done than benefits brought.
Yeah.
And so
But
for most guys,
you'd be
oh yeah, go
seeing a
for it.
skewed view of that as well, wouldn't you? Because you're really seeing the men who can identify themselves that they're having harm. So you're not seeing the men who, whether they have or not, think they have a healthy relationship with porn.
Even, I mean, because this is what I do for work. So I have a lot of conversations with just random people who aren't coming to me for work. And almost every person I talk to, they realize that when you look at the benefits it brings, they're just very minor in comparison to the potential harms. Not even the potential harms, the actual harms in terms of what it does to your dopamine systems. I do think it's different from men and women. I mean, there's some studies that for men and women, it is slightly different. Women definitely can be addicted and it can cause a lot of harm. And I do have some female clients. But I do think women, just because we are different biologically, there is more of a capacity to have a healthier relationship with using it. That being said, like the big elephant in the room here is that the porn industry is intricately interlinked with a lot of sex trafficking and really abusive things that we can't ignore.
No.
So anyone who says, I have a healthy relationship with porn and I'm not causing any harm, there's a lot of harm being caused by the porn industry in terms of sex trafficking, child abuse, all kinds of abuse of the actors,
Yeah, there's a lot.
drugs. I mean,
Yeah.
just people being taken advantage of and exploited. There's so much harm being caused by the porn industry that we're not actually addressing and we're sweeping under the rug. And again, I'm not coming at this from this kind of moralistic, sex is evil. Like I'm a very liberal. I was raised in a liberal household in California, sex positive, and I am sex positive. I'm all for kind of like healthy sexuality and embracing your kinks and desires and all these things. But to understand there's a healthy balance there. And I think a lot of people take it too far and say, there's a lot of people in denial of how it's impacting their views of intimacy and sexuality, because the majority of what's on porn sites these days is garbage. It's really harmful.
I think the biggest thing that I see in my clinic from this issue is body dysmorphia. So men who think that there is something wrong with their penis or that it's ridiculously small when it's actually very normal, because, to be an actor on a porn show, you're going to usually be chosen because you're the right-hand end of the bell curve. And then if you're a heterosexual male, you've never seen an erect penis before that's not yours. And so you just accept on porn. So you assume that there's something wrong with you when you're probably very, very healthy and normal. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a man who has told me they think their penis is a micro penis that has actually had one. They've always had a completely normal penis. And I spend quite a lot of time with a picture of 100 different penises going, this is what they're supposed to look like. Yours is normal. So,
Right.
yeah.
So that topic is like one piece of a much bigger problem of unrealistic expectations. Part of it is the body dysmorphia that men can experience. Women also have incredible body dysmorphia because they're thinking they need to look like the porn stars that they're seeing in the porn they're watching.
Yeah.
But on top of that, it goes beyond the body. It's also about what, the expectations of what healthy sex looks like.
Yeah.
So all these young boys and girls are thinking that they all need to be into anal sex. They all need to be into choking and slapping. They all think that if a girl says no, she actually wants it. She just wants you to push harder. It's like all these different ways that the expectations of intimacy and what is normal get shifted in these unhealthy ways because porn is a fantasy. And especially young kids who are starting to watch this and growing up with this don't know the difference. I mean, imagine a 10-year-old boy right now watching the majority of what he's seeing on Pornhub for the next 10 years. He's getting this idea that porn is all about choking and slapping and anal, and that's what's normal and that's what girls want. And the young girls are getting this idea too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the the young boys are getting the idea that all vulvas look a certain way and,
Exactly.
the women the other. And I can definitely see that there's issues with it, definitely. So can you explain in simple terms what happens to your brain, because, this is your thing, when men get stuck in this compulsive pattern of watching porn all the time?
Yeah. One kind of helpful way of looking at it is understanding what's called the amygdala hijack. So the amygdala, is this part of the brain that's often thought of as kind of the alarm system for the brain, the salience network. It's the fight, flight, or freeze response that a lot of people know. What's interesting, it's also there's actually a fourth F in there. It's the flight, fight, freeze, or fuck response. So it's actually
Excellent.
all of the things. It's not just the running away scared. It's also the, ooh, I see something I want and I want to get it.
Yeah.
It's that feeling of being hijacked by our emotional limbic system. And so what
Lizard
happens?
brain? Is that what people refer to as
Yeah, you could call it the
brain?
lizard brain. Yeah, it's kind of the more ancestral part of our brainstem. And it evolved to kind of keep us safe and get our needs met and not overthink things, but just go and grab and go and do this or run away and fight. And what happens, what's really interesting is that the amygdala, again, this fight, flight, or freeze or fuck response, what happens is when that part gets activated, when you get into one of these response states, it will hijack the rest of the brain. What it does is it actually it downregulates the activity of the prefrontal cortex. It shuts off your ability to think rationally and think clearly. And it just wants you to react without thinking. And it literally will shut down the other parts of the brain. And so one of the things that's really helpful of understanding is that when you get into one of these states where you're having strong urges and you're feeling compelled to just log on to porn, you are in a hijacked state. Your amygdala has gotten hijacked because all you want is that pleasure. Your brain says you've got to have that pleasure. And if you don't get it, you're in trouble.
Yeah. So that part
yeah,
of your brain is driving you and you've got no control.
exactly.
It's a bit
And
like
that's when you get
Tesla.
hooked. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you go on autopilot, and this is
Yeah.
a lot of guys, and this was my experience as well. Is we have this experience. It feels like you're not in control. It feels like you're a zombie and you're just on autopilot. And then this term, post-nut clarity happens to a lot of guys where as soon as they orgasm, they kind of wake up to their surroundings and they look around and they say, "What have I been doing the last 2 hours? What am I doing with my life? This isn't how I'm supposed to live." But the
Yeah.
problem is these things are habitual loops. They're compulsive behaviors.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things I always say to guys when they talk about this with me is that, is you watching porn interfering with your daily life? Because if you're spending 2 hours a day doing something like that, that has to be impacting something else that would be better for you, like exercising, eating healthy food, working, hanging out with your friends. And
One of the most common things that I hear from people who I work with is they're so fed up of wasting their life on something that is so meaningless. Like getting back to that question of like, what are the harms of porn? It doesn't even have to be these grand things about screwing with your intimacy or, you're getting into legal trouble. It can just be the way that you're wasting most of your life on something that is so pointless and so meaningless. And so many guys feel that. They just feel that they're not pursuing their dreams. They're not engaged in their hobbies or connecting with friends. They're sitting alone in a room in front of a screen for hours masturbating. And they're so sick and tired of it.
I mean, it's not as extreme, but I even think watching reels is like this, and I think you and I obviously have social media channels and we want people to watch our reels. And I hope that because, I'm trying to educate people and so are you. But I do think there's, I watch people in my family, in my friend group, just wasting time on watching reels and,
Yeah.
and I can see how it's just like if you're stressed or whatever, it really can distract you and take you out of your own head for a while. But I just can't believe how much time I watch people watching reels. I'm like, wow, I just don't have that time. So
Yeah,
I feel like it's the same. It's, obviously not pornography, but it's still this thing of just giving you a quick fix of dopamine, and then it just keeps going on, and you don't have to concentrate on your problems or solve anything because you're just disappeared.
exactly. And that's, we talked about this earlier. It doesn't really have anything to do with a particular behavior or substance. It's about
Mm.
the act of escaping and not wanting to deal with your emotions, not wanting to be with your reality. And so anything that we can use as an escape can become an addiction. It doesn't matter if it's porn or social media reels or Netflix or junk food. All these things can be escapes for people. And that's why in recovery, we really have to look at not just the behavior, but the intention behind the behavior.
Yeah.
That's what's really important is if somebody's watching, reels, the question is, what's the intention that they have behind it? Is it because they want to learn something valuable? Is it because they're genuinely interested in going there intentionally to watch it for a couple minutes and then disengage? Or is it because they're procrastinating, or
Mm.
they don't want to be with their loneliness, or they don't want to be with their sadness?
Or they
So
don't
there's
wanna think about all the overwhelming things they have to do, or
exactly
yeah.
stress, overwhelm, anxiety. All of addiction really comes down to people wanting to run away from unpleasant emotions that they don't know how to be with or process or deal with.
Yeah. So if like when I've looked at your work, you combine mindfulness and neuroscience. Can you explain how they work together and how that helps someone get out of this compulsive behavior loop that they're in?
Yeah. A big turning point in my own personal journey was really understanding neuroscience and particularly neuroplasticity. So I remember very clearly reading this one quote from a neuroscientist who said, "Neurons that fire together wire together."
Mhm.
And it's this understanding that the more frequently you use certain neural pathways, the stronger those connections become. You're literally strengthening the synaptic connections there. But it just means that the more often you think a type of thought, the more easily that type of thought or feeling is going to arise in the future. So if you're constantly engaged in judgment, you're judging this, you're judging that, you're judging other people, judging yourself, you're strengthening the neural pathways associated with judgment. The
Mhm.
same goes for stress or anxiety or fear. What we do, we strengthen those different types of behaviors. And over time, that becomes the more habitual response. So what I realized is every time I'm logging onto a porn site and masturbating and looking at porn, I am strengthening the neural pathways of lust and craving and dissatisfaction, of not feeling satisfied with what I have, but wanting something more.
Mm.
So, first of all, understanding just the basics of that's what you're doing to your brain is really important. But the benefit is that you can use that understanding to carve out a pathway for freedom, which is if what you really want is to feel content in your life, to have real contentment, like, oh, what I have is enough. I don't need more.
Yeah.
You can strengthen those neural pathways. And that's essentially what meditation training is you're training your mind in the qualities that you want to pervade your life. If you want gratitude to pervade your life, you have to strengthen those neural pathways. If you want courage and fortitude and resilience, you have to strengthen those neural pathways. So, mindfulness is the type of meditation that we can use to strengthen these particular qualities. It's very kind of simple in that way.
And what about people? Actually, I was listening to another podcast recently called ADHD Chatter, and the podcaster on there was talking about how, meditation is so difficult for people like that. How do they deal with it? Because, they want to be able to improve that to do mindfulness, but it's actually really difficult for someone in that
Yeah.
situation
So
to do that.
totally. And part of that is misconceptions around what meditation is and what a good meditation looks like. So many people have this idea that meditation is about sitting down, clearing your thoughts, sitting really still and not moving and just having a clear mind that doesn't think anything. And that's just a wild kind of misconception of what meditation is and what a good meditation session looks like. What it really is, just learning how to observe what's going on in your mind at any given moment. You can have the most agitated, crazy mind that just jumps all over the place. We call it the monkey mind in Buddhism. You could have the craziest monkey mind ever, and that's fine. Your mind could be all over the place. The goal is to actually simply see that it's all over the place.
Mhm.
That's what real mindfulness is. It's not to slow down the mind or, block out your thoughts. It's to be able to be aware of what's happening and to have a healthier relationship with what's happening. So to not judge what's happening as saying, oh, this is a bad thought or I'm a bad person, but oh, right now I'm experiencing strong feelings of lust. Oh, how interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
You don't have to stop the lust. It's just to notice that it's there so that you then have a choice of saying, do I want to act on this? Would that be skillful? Would that be helpful? Would it bring more goodness into my life? It's having that ability to simply see what's happening and then act on it skillfully. So this is one of the things that, I was really passionate about before even talking about porn addiction was just helping people understand what meditation really is and how to do it correctly.
I worked at the Cocos Islands, the Cocos Christmas Island. It's in the middle of the
Hmm.
Indian Ocean. I worked there quite a long time ago now, actually about 20 years ago. It shows my age. And I was running a health service, and I organised for a guy to come there and teach meditation to the community. And he had a really interesting approach to it. Instead of sitting still, he did teach that type of meditation, but he also taught walking meditation.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really fantastic for people who struggle with the whole sitting still thing. It was like you could walk and concentrate on your breath or the palm trees waving or whatever it was, but it was really a way of just calming your mind and concentrating on the two things, walking and your surroundings or walking and your breathing. And I found that really helpful. But the other thing, and I've often suggested that to people when they've talked about how they've tried to meditate and it's really hard. And I'm a person who finds sitting still meditation extremely difficult. And so I actually got a lot out of this. And do you feel like, is that as beneficial as just sitting?
Yes, and so this is great. Meditation has nothing to do with the posture that you're in. It doesn't matter if you're sitting. The Buddha even talked about it. He said whether you're sitting, standing, walking, or lying down, or in between. Basically, any position or posture or movement is a fine place to practice. So, walking meditation is great. Sitting meditation is great. Chopping vegetables meditation is great.
Mhm.
Brushing your teeth meditation, they're all fantastic. Again, it's simply about, are you cultivating awareness of what you're experiencing in the present moment as you're doing it? So, yeah, walking meditation is great, particularly for people who maybe have ADHD or are kind of fidgety, to do some simple walking meditation where you're just feeling the left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot.
Mhm.
Fantastic way to practice. The and part, the yes and, is that again, one of the kind of the big roadblocks is that people think that meditation is about finding a way to calm down or to experience bliss or to be at peace. And so anything that's uncomfortable, like this feeling of, oh, I can't meditate, it's too uncomfortable. You're missing out on the opportunity to learn how to be with discomfort. In some ways, that's one of the major benefits of mindfulness in particular, is learning how to make space for what's uncomfortable without running away from it.
Okay.
Because again, that's the mind of addiction that says, I don't like this feeling of discomfort, whether it's boredom, pain in my knee, whatever. I'm restless. I don't like this. I need to feel good. I
Mm.
need to feel better. And so let me do something to medicate myself or to make this feeling of discomfort go away. And we become, as a society, so averse to anything that's unpleasant that that's why we're looking for all these little dopamine hits in social media, in our inbox, in junk food and porn, is that we don't know how to actually simply be with an unpleasant experience without running away from it.
Yeah.
And so, in a big way, doing a kind of meditation practice that is unpleasant in some way and learning how to be at peace with the unpleasantness is part of the training. If walking feels better for you, do it. But don't keep searching for this pleasant experience all the time, because that's just another trap. People can get they can get addicted to meditative states, and they're just searching for a new high somewhere else.
Yeah.
Part of it is really the equanimity that says, this is okay the way it is.
So lots of men who have sexual dysfunction, then like erectile dysfunction, loss of libido, premature ejaculation, they don't really realize how their porn use or whatever their compulsive behavior could be contributing it to us. Can you explain how that interaction works?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so fascinating that so many men will have erectile dysfunction or problems with intimacy. And the idea that porn might be part of the problem is so far from their minds, but it's almost so obviously part of the problem. I mean, in a lot of ways, again, let's just take erectile dysfunction or delayed ejaculation as an example. If a guy is constantly on a daily basis training his mind to get aroused from what he's seeing on a screen in front of him and from some very, high fantasy, very erotic, very extreme type of
Mm.
behavior he's seeing, he's training his brain that that's where arousal comes from. And so then when he's with his partner, who's a 3D person and has smells and it might get messy, they might fart, all these kinds of things, it doesn't do it for them because they're not used to that. Their brain has been wired to think arousal is somewhere else. That arousal is when they're sitting in a certain posture in front of a screen, getting something injected in through their eyes. And so that's why so much of this erectile dysfunction happens is it's just men are getting accustomed to getting it somewhere else and their brain doesn't know how to handle normal intimacy.
Yeah, we do see that quite a lot. So what I'm just thinking about, how do you think that what would be like an easy takeaway for someone to go, okay, I'm obviously watching too much porn or whatever their compulsive behavior is because it's interfering with my daily life and it's bringing me more harm than good. So for instance, you've watched 2 hours of porn and you might have had an orgasm and you get that dopamine rush, but then you realize that you haven't done all the things you needed to do and you're going to be really stressed tomorrow because you're not ready for your day. What's some way that they can like stop that of next time they feel the urge? Like what's a technique they could do to go, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to do something else.
Mm. The first thing I would say, which is not necessarily an in the moment technique, but one of the most important things that I recommend is for guys to get connected with other guys who are on this path. Because trying to do this alone, you're so reliant on just these little blips of motivation, and you're up against these strong forces of all the kind of societal normalization of sexuality and porn, and against your own decades of hardwiring of that behavior in. It's very hard to do it without some accountability.
Mm.
Because the moment you might have these strong aspirations and good intentions, I'm going to quit this, I'm going to beat this. But then when the rubber meets the road and it gets tough and you're stressed and bored and lonely and irritable and you just want your fix, it's just too easy to give in because you say, well, nobody's going to know the difference. I might as well. I'll start again on Monday. I'll try next week. And so getting connected with some kind of accountability with a therapist, with a coach, a men's group in your area, an online community like the one I run, finding some way to get connected to other men to remind yourself and actually be held accountable. So that's the first thing. In the moment, this is where mindfulness plays a key role. Is if you have some kind of regular mindfulness practice of paying attention to what's happening, you can start to catch those moments before you actually act out. You can start to notice the urge to act out before you do it. Because most guys, if they have no mindfulness training, it's very hard to catch it before it happens. It's very hard to catch it before you're already just on the porn site. This is
Yeah.
why mindfulness training, it gives you that ability to notice, oh, I'm feeling aroused. I'm feeling a desire to act out. Oh, how interesting. okay, what do I want to do now? Then, you're faced with this choice and to say, do I want to act out? Is this leading me to a life that's important to me and meaningful? There's so many little questions here that you can ask yourself, but sometimes just taking a deep breath, really breathing in and out deeply through your belly, knowing that all emotions, will only last 90 seconds unless you feed them. So if you just wait it out for 90 seconds and get curious and say, oh, I wonder if this urge to act out will last more than 90 seconds. By the end of those 90 seconds, it won't be there anymore. Sometimes it keeps coming up because you keep feeding it with your thoughts. And so you can go for a walk, you can call a friend. I wish I could say that there's one little thing like, here's the solution that will, but the truth is like, to be a successful person in recovery, we need a lot of different tools in our toolbox because sometimes one tool doesn't work and you need to reach in your toolbox and grab something else. So having friends in recovery, going for walks, deep breaths, supporting your environment is also important. Knowing what your triggers are. There's a whole host of things that are important.
So, explain to us if somebody is listening and they're going, okay, this sounds great. I feel like I would like to work on this. How would they, like, what does your community offer? How do they join? What do they do?
Yeah, the community that I run, it's first and foremost, it's a men's group that's there for accountability and support for people who want to be surrounded by other men who are on the same journey of making their lives better and breaking free from this thing that is, quite toxic in their lives. So having weekly accountability, there's a weekly live call with myself and the members of the community where it's a chance to check in and get support and ask questions, be held accountable.
I
There's
just
also
keep
a
thinking when you're saying this, it feels like Weight Watchers for porn addiction. It's great because
Mm.
Weight Watchers works.
I was never,
Mm.
yeah, I never really got into Weight Watchers, but that accountability, they know this in organizations as well, that if you have what's called a regular cadence of accountability, it helps you execute on your goals and aspirations.
I
It's
mean,
like,
I think the way Weight
yeah,
Watchers works, I've not done it, but I think it works that you have to go back every Monday night or whatever it is and, you know, talk to the other people in your group about how you've done that week. And so
yeah,
every time you want to do something that might stray from that is you think, hang on, I'm going to have to go there on Monday. Am I going to feel ashamed or how am I going to feel when I have to say that?
yeah. And there's a fine line there. A big part of the community I run is that it's a shame-free
Yeah, good.
approach.
Yeah.
We don't shame people. It's not about being perfect. It's not like, oh, you relapsed. You're at day zero and
Mm.
sit at the back of the bus. It's understanding that you don't have to be perfect. It's just about showing up and being honest with yourself and saying, hey, can I be better than I was myself last week? Can I improve from last week? And so there's no shame, but just being, there is that fine line is like being held accountable. There is a little bit of healthy shame there. Not all shame is toxic
No.
shame.
Yeah, it's like not all
Um,
anxiety is bad.
exactly. Yeah. Sometimes we need to worry if we're going up Mount Everest,
Yeah.
and have some anxiety. So it's a shame-free approach, but it is holding each other accountable. And then on top of that, in the community that I run, there's also an online course and modules that really help people understand really how to go to the root of the addiction, not just try to white knuckle it and use willpower to get to a streak, but really understand their addiction from the inside out. So that's a big part of the program that I run as well, is really helping people understand this at the core level.
So which is to find out your why. Why are you feeling drawn to this? What is it you're escaping or what is it you're replacing?
That's part of it. Yeah, part of it is the why. Part of it might be exploring, what happened in the past, but it's also just about what is this addictive tendency? What does craving feel like? Where do I feel craving in my body? Like because a lot of people think, oh, it's always just about what's your trauma and what happened to you when you were a kid. And that can be a part of it, but it's not necessarily a part of it. I mean, it's really about understanding addiction at the root level. So part of it could be your why, but part of it could just be, what is this feeling that's arising that I don't want to be with? And how can I make space for that experience? If loneliness is coming up, how can I actually be with my loneliness and make space for it?
Yeah. This has been great. Thank you so much. So if people wanted to find you and find out more, where do they find your podcast? And tell us what it's called and how would they find out more about your community?
Yeah. So if you're interested in the community, you can just go to unhookedacademy.com and all the information is there about how to join and what's included. If you're interested in just learning more about this kind of topic, my podcast is called Unhooked. You should be able to just search Unhooked on any podcast platform and you'll find it. We talk about everything related to addiction and mindfulness and intimacy and sexuality. So it's a really cool podcast. I get on with some cool experts on there. So definitely check out the podcast if you're interested.
Will do. I think, the podcast is probably a great way for people to start and then go, yeah, I really like this idea. I'm going to have a look at the community. And how long have you had the podcast going for?
I think I'm almost like 4 years now.
Great. Yep. I've had this one going for 5 years and I know that shows a massive amount of commitment to keep going. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. They say most podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes or something.
I think so. Actually,
if you make it past 10, you're in the top 99th percentile, I think.
I always get disappointed when I'm listening to one that I really like and then I get to episode 10 or 11 and then that's it. They've lost mojo and I'm like, oh, I was actually enjoying their speaking. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a lot of effort. So kudos to you as well.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And I will put all of the information for people in the show notes. And yeah, I'm really glad that you reached out to us because I think it'll really help myself and the other clinicians in my practice when people say they're worried about this and we can go, okay, we've got someone that you might be able to help you and certainly a community that could provide support.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure joining you and happy to come on anytime.